that?
Well, I think Obama gave us Obama. And look, if Mr. Trump, Donald Trump, can run his campaign any way he wants. If he wants to run down George Bush and ask for the Republican nominee, I don't think that's a winning strategy. And if he wants to base his entire campaign upon whether or not Barack Obama was really born in the United States, that's his privilege. I just think it's a losing strategy. And I think it's beneath him. In fact, it's amazing. Here's a guy who is a businessman, who's accomplished. I had a conversation with his chief political guy who called me this weekend and said, I thought you had friendship for Mr. Trump, and all you're showing is hatred. Yeah. And I said, no. Well, I just think it's strange that a guy with his background would spend the last 4.5 weeks making Barack Obama's birth certificate the centerpiece of his nascent presidential campaign. If that's what the #1 issue is,
but maybe it's resonating.
But I don't think that's what the American people are concerned about.
Karl, maybe it's resonating. Put up on the screen, if we can, the PPP poll that just came out a few days ago, and it's got Donald Trump 9 points ahead of any other potential candidate there. I mean,
Greg,
whether you agree with this issue or not that he's glommed onto, my goodness,
Greg, he's a name.
It's resonating.
Well, first of all, this is a Democrat polling firm in North Carolina who's got a notoriously bad record of calling the Republican primary. And look, fine, Donald Trump got 25-26%. I don't think he's a serious candidate. And until he files for it and pays his filing fee and goes to South Carolina and Iowa and New Hampshire and does the things that people have, I think he's been doing this for the last 20 years. How many times have we heard Donald Trump pretend to toss his hat in the ring? And look, this is a guy who said Barack Obama would be a great president, that Nancy Pelosi was the best, that George W. Bush was evil. He's now in favor of declaring war in Iraq by saying, give us $1.4 trillion or our troops are going to take your oil fields. I mean, fine, let him get his attention on The Apprentice, but I just don't think he's doing the things necessary to be taken seriously by the American people.
Yeah.
And we'll see.
Wait till people realize that it wasn't that long ago he was advocating universal health care like Canada.
Canadian health care. He loves the Canadian health care system. Wrote it in his book. Here's a guy who favored abortion rights just a few years ago. Here's a guy who's in favor of higher taxes. Here's a guy who's a protectionist. He's against the Korea and Colombia free trade deals. That's fine. Let him go out there and advocate these things. But he has not made the centerpiece of his campaign this. What he's made the centerpiece of the last 5 weeks is the birth certificate. And guess what his guy told me this weekend? His guy told me this weekend, well, it's not Mr. Trump's fault. He said the press keeps asking him about it. I said, well, why don't next time he's asked about it, why doesn't he say, well, that's the last, I've said all I'm going to say on it. I want to talk about the big issues, deficit, debt, and respect for America and the world. And he called me back a little while, about half an hour later, and said, oh, Mr. Trump appreciates your advice, and that's exactly what he's going to do. And then he goes out yesterday and says, this birther issue, the birth certificate issue, is a real big issue. Fine, go ahead and do that. But I think it marginalizes a guy who had a potential to contribute to the dialogue.